My career is quite different from the Western mathematicians and from the young mathematicians today. I entered a college, a small college in China, which altogether had only about 300 students in all fields. And my father just sent me there because he thought I should have a college education. I had no idea, say, what I will do afterwards. Mm-hmm. Now, somehow, say, my inclination to mathematics brought me to science. So I should say, gradually I became a student in the College of Science. Mm-hmm. And my inability to do experimental work, say, finally made mathematics the natural choice. And the mathematics department had only one professor. He got his PhD from Harvard. He was an excellent teacher, so I followed him. I took a lot of courses from him, beginning with advanced calculus and linear algebra, and also later on more advanced subjects. So his name is Chern, C-H-R-A-N-G. Mm-hmm. He got his degree with Julian Coolidge at Harvard. At Harvard. I think he had a lot of influence on me. Then I somehow, say, at a very early stage, I always have an inclination doing something not necessarily fashionable. Mm-hmm. So, and it turns out that in 1932, Wilhelm Blaschke came to visit China, and I listened to his lectures.
At your university, at your college?
No, at my university, in Beijing. Mm-hmm. At that time called Beiping. And I got a stipend in 1934. In fact, it was a stipend for studying in the United States. But I petitioned that I want to go to Europe, to Hamburg, to study with Blaschke. Mm-hmm. I didn't attend too many of his lectures because he was traveling a lot at that time. Mm-hmm. But it was his advice that I should go to work with Élie CARTAN as a postdoctoral student.
So you got your degree from Hamburg?
From Hamburg in 1936. Mm-hmm. And then, say, from 36 to 37, I was in Paris.
You were in Paris?
Yeah, I was in Paris. Yeah.
So then you met CARTAN regularly? Or?
Oh, yes. In fact, at the beginning, you see, CARTAN was one who has a lot of little problems. So the first time I saw Élie CARTAN, he gave me a problem. Yeah. It's a question of having a geometric structure, try to define intrinsic connection, which should give all the analytic geometric properties of the structure. And naturally, I couldn't do it. So after probably about a month, I saw him again on the stairway of Institut Poincaré. Mm-hmm. And we shook hands, and he asked, why didn't you come to see me? I told him that I couldn't do your problem. And then he said, see me anyway. So I talked to him. And later on, I knew more of the area. I was able to, it was a nice problem. I was able even to do the problem he first gave it to me. Mm-hmm. Then after probably 3-4 months, he told me that I could see him in his apartment. Uh-huh. At that time, I stayed at the Fondation Suisse of the City University there, and his apartment was on the same street.
Yes.
I saw him about say once every 2 weeks. I just went to his apartment without appointment. Yeah, he usually opened the door for me. His study, and this apartment now occupied by Henri CARTAN, and usually he himself opened the door. His study is right at the door, was at the right at the door. So we had talks for about an hour, and I gave him a report. Usually I wrote up, say, and the results I got during these couple of weeks, and also wrote down the question in French. so he could read them and give me answer in French. We talked to each other in French. Yeah, and it was very nice because usually the next day I got a letter from Élie CARTAN, and he would say, "Après votre débat, je vous remercie. I thought about your questions again, and you're very intéressant, doing this and doing that." So it was a very hard working period. You see, these 2 weeks I had to do some of the problems. He has a lot of little problems. Yeah, I had to do his problem and try to think about different things.
So you consider this year as very crucial for you?
Very crucial, yeah, because because this year the main thing, I wrote a number of papers during this year, but the main thing is that after this year, I found CARTAN not difficult to read. I was able to. I found it I was able to think more or less in the same way he did, and that was very profitable.
Clearly now one sees that there are very strong ties for the education between China and the United States.
Yes.
Do you think that in the future Europe has still a role to play in the education and development of Chinese mathematicians?
I think it's already playing an important role. One difficulty for Chinese students to go to Europe is the language. Students, they go into Germany or France, have to learn additional language, but they have to know English anyway, but they need a new one. And more students are going to England. But I think one difficulty, so far as I understand, for students go to England is the lack of support. The more students come to the United States, but because it is relatively easy for a good mathematics student to get the support.
So you don't see any scientific reasons why people would?
No. I think there are some Chinese mathematicians going to Europe. Yeah, quite a few.
But for instance, not as many as in the States.
Yeah, but in the Chinese communists, still United States, the number is very large. Yeah. For instance, I was told that there are about 2,000 Chinese students who either have completed their PhDs or are getting their PhDs. It's an enormous number.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Let me allow me to isolate one of your major contributions to mathematics, namely your work on characteristic classes. When did you realize that you had really put your hands on a very important phenomenon?
Well, right at the beginning. Right at the beginning.
Could you be more specific? Or?
Oh yeah, I think you see, all started with my proof of the Gauss-Bonnet formula. Yeah, and that year was 1943. I went from China to Princeton, to the Institute for Advanced Study, and I met Élie. He just finished his paper with Arendorf on the Gauss-Bonnet formula. The way their way of cutting the Riemann manifold into manifold with boundary and fit them together and so on. So Andre asked me, why couldn't there be a direct proof? Yeah. Now, so I naturally look at the simplest case, the case of surface, and then I found that in the case of surface, it's given by this formula, the exterior by the transgression formula.
To go up to the bundle.
Yeah, to the bundle. Yeah. Now this, because that transgression formula contains not only the proof of the Gauss-Bonnet for surfaces with boundary, also gives a proof of the Gauss theorem aggregate. Everything is in this one formula. And I was very happy with that, because even in the two-dimensional case, this is something people like Gauss and Gauss or Dabu didn't have, even for surfaces. And the question of the Gauss-Bonnet, in a review article by Heinz Hauff, he mentioned this is the most important and most difficult problem in differential geometry. In his paper called Differential Geometry, Differential Geometry und Topologische Gestalt. He published in the Jahresberichte der deutschen Mathematikvereinigung. So I was very happy with that proof.
I see.
Then naturally, say, if you do something for the Euler class, you try to do it for the Stephen-Whitney class. And that's the first effort I made, and I soon realized that you must complexify. Because over real manifold, the torsion is always bothersome, and so differential form and the torsion, they don't fit together. So I realized that everything becomes simpler. You go to complex. Now, it took some time for the complex characteristic classes to be useful, much longer. But the proof of Gauss-Bonnet, I was very happy with it.
Okay, so it's right at the beginning.
Right at the beginning, yeah.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I might also mention, you see, I was at the Institute, so I showed this paper to Hermann Bahr. I showed this manuscript, and he congratulated me. He was very happy with the proof. Before that, I had a paper on, it's called The Geometry of Isotropic Surfaces, published in the Annals of Mathematics. And Hermann Bahr was the referee. So when I first sent this paper from China to Lefschetz, who was the editor of the Annals, I got a letter from Lefschetz saying that we have so many papers, and it would be nice if you could withdraw your paper. Yeah. And then say, I didn't answer Lefschetz's letter, but then say about a month or so later, so I got another letter from Lefschetz saying that your paper has been refereed, and the referee recommended very highly, and we are glad to publish in the Annals. It was a long report by the referee. I think it's almost 10 pages report. And after I went to Princeton, one day Hermann Bahr asked me, Chern, do you know who refereed that paper of yours? It was Hermann Bahr. Yeah. So he knew this work of mine. So we had a lot of contact, and Bahr expressed great appreciation of this paper on the proof of the gospel.
Okay, so you felt confident by yourself and by the environment that you were on the right track.
Oh yes. Yeah.
So differential geometry used to be a field with an old tradition in mathematics, but which had become, in a sense, marginal. In the last 20 years, it has become much more central, and many other branches of mathematics have started to gain interest in differential geometry. Could you comment on this process of differential geometry being again in the forefront of the scene?
Yeah, in my understanding, in European universities, differential geometry was usually called application of characteristic geometry.
Very often.
Yeah,
Yes.
And I think what's important, because after all, the founding fathers of the calculus, they all played with the geometric concepts. And later on, people like Euler, Lagrange, a lot of their works greatly involved with geometry. Yeah. So in a sense, it was always an important part of mathematics. Now, it was probably superseded first by functional complex variable. Became very fashionable. It dominated almost the whole field of mathematics for some time, and then later on by algebra and also abstract algebra. But its importance was recognized always through some development in theoretic physics. Right. Einstein relativity shifted the attention on differential geometry. And now, of course, it's became involved with more mathematics than in the past. Than in the past, which is very natural. In a sense, it's now difficult to say what is geometry, because once it goes to high dimensions, hardly you see the figure. Although computer graphics sometimes give you beautiful pictures, but some of the real progress are still done analytically. Yeah, analytically. Yeah.
But do you believe that the progress in differential geometry itself made this movement towards the forefront of the scene possible, or is it completely independent?
Okay. Well, I think one of the great developments, in my opinion, is the development in fiber bundles, fiber bundles or vector bundles, because you see, on the one hand, you have very general spaces. On the other hand, you have special spaces like Euclidean spaces, non-Euclidean spaces, and some of those figures lying in these spaces. Yeah. Now, the fiber bundles is a notion which combines these two, so that the property on the fiber remains simple, but the base space could be very general. And the characteristic classes are significant because they are rare invariants which are involved both with local and with global properties. So by playing with both of them, you get some of the most important developments.
And how do you see the role of differential geometry in the future?
I think we will remain very central.
Okay, yeah. So you're very optimistic for your
Oh yes,
field. In a sense, recently the influence by physicists on mathematicians has been very important, and the Institute of Mathematics at Nankai University, which opened a few years back, and under your leadership and personal supervision, is going to have now a new branch in theoretical physics.
Yes.
Can you explain to us how you view these relations between the mathematics and theoretical physics, at least? Or?
I hope it will be even closer. Yeah, because the type of mathematics we are doing, I mean, we looking at this Summer Institute is very close to the interest of some of the theoretical physicists. And the physics division of the Nankai Institute is supervised by C.N. Yang. Yeah. And according to Yang, they are doing very, very nice work. For instance, they found new solutions of the Yang-Baxter equations.
Maybe I come to a more general question. In an article published by the American Mathematical Monthly, you draw a parallel between the development of geometry and that of human clothing. And the concept of manifold being put into correspondence with modern man and the way he dresses.
I don't know, I mean, just for fun, of course.
Yeah, sure, I understood that. Yeah. Could you comment more on this parallel about the various stages of development of
I think there should be new clothing.
There should be new clothing.
Yeah, there should be new clothing. It's no reason, say, why people should wear the ancient clothing. Whatever is modern now will become ancient in a number of years from now.
So what would be the new clothing for geometry then, after manifolds?
Well, I think the natural things is, it should not be so smooth.
Shouldn't be so smooth.
Yeah, shouldn't be smooth. Should have, I think the differential geometers or differential geometers should look at singularities. Yeah. Now it is remarkable. Why should differentiability play such a role in geometry? Say, why? I mean, one would like to think that maybe the concept continuity would be sufficient, like topology. Yeah. But somehow the smoothness rules out a lot of uninteresting things and keeps the important and interesting things. And I think, say, somehow the functions, I don't know, it's a mystery that functions should be at least twice differentiable, because I mean, calculus variations, yeah? You need to talk about critical points. It's much nicer for the function to be smooth, but you have to look a little bit farther, look at the second derivative, second variation, isolated. So, but on the smooth is just the common properties. I think the most important properties are concentrated at singular points. Yeah. So I was thinking, say, the concept of a stratified manifold or some modification of it should be given more attention. And after all, say, almost all the important theorems in global differential geometry have combinatorial or discrete counterpart. That's a difficulty. Yeah, you hard to keep the important things and throw away the unimportant things.
Sure.
That takes work and takes great insight.
A general comment you made in reply to your colleagues about during your celebration the other day, and you opposed in some way an Eastern vision of science, which was focusing on quote-unquote small interesting problems, and a Western one, and you quoted Einstein for that, who was more interested on the unique problem of the whole. Could you comment further on this position between these two?
I don't know whether it's really a difference between East and West. Just different views. Probably there are people of both schools in both places. Yeah. I just quoted this for fun. No, there is a Western tendency, say, in having, say, some unique, something which is the only one. Yeah. Now, like the early days, Kant would say that Euclidean space is the only space. Yeah. Also, I suppose Western people think there's only one God.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's
the Western, based on the Western culture. Yeah. And the Chinese are. Don't feel that Confucius himself is, I mean, he's very, very liberal. Yeah, he's willing to accept all kinds of ideas.
So in the same reply to your colleagues, you emphasize how important it is to have fun when doing research. How do you see these individual motivations being regulated at the community level? I mean, when you put all these people together, aren't you fearing that this attitude may exacerbate the phenomenon of research being driven purely by fashion?
It's very hard to say. I think all mathematicians like to think about those little problems. And in a certain period, for instance, I was in a lot of contact with somebody like Paul Edders. And it was very dangerous to think about the Edders problem because they're very interesting and challenging, but you get nowhere after several weeks. And say if I did something like this, Andre Weil would tell me, say, don't do that. Yeah. So I mean, so in a sense, every mathematician has this choice in the course of his life or of his career. Yeah. So you have to make all kinds of decisions and try. Although you do mathematics for fun, you still should have a sense of the significance of your work. Yeah. So the line between the individual work or and collective work, or the lines between fashion and non-fashion is not clearly drawn.
So again, a matter of judgment.
Yes, yeah.
So you quoted just Andre Weil about, did he also influence your way of working or thinking?
Oh, yes.
You were colleagues during a critical period for you, I mean, in Chicago.
Oh, I think Andre had a lot of influence on me, yeah.
In your reply, you also stressed that it appeared important to you to help out some of your students who were having difficulties fulfilling some official requirements. You probably did so not only on principle, but because you saw in some of them a certain talent. How were you convinced that they had enough talent to succeed?
That's true. You see, I cannot do this to everybody. Yeah, everybody. So you have to be able. I mean, you do a little bit gambling. Yeah, you gamble on certain students. Now, I mentioned specifically Jim Simons. Jim was clearly a very outstanding student. You see, he, as a student, when Jim wants to learn something, he will learn it and put a notice that he was going to give a lecture on something. And even he did it so well, even the faculty, some of the faculty attended his lectures. Yeah, so clearly it was a case deserving of help. But generally, I was willing to extend it quite down the line and try to help students. Yeah, always have sympathy with students who have difficulty and try to help them out if possible.
But in a sense, you felt that in a sense people should be given a chance. I mean,
Oh
that
yes.
was the key
Oh
thing.
yes. Oh yes. Yeah.
Maybe to come to more the general subject, in many of the Western countries, in particular the United States, but also in France, one can witness a certain disdain for scientific studies, in particular for mathematics. Do you see obvious causes for this situation? I'm speaking about the young people, of course.
Oh yeah, I think it's obvious because it takes hard work. It's a long period of work, and it's not clear that one could succeed even after years of devotion to the subject. So there's a certain risk, and it's the risk you take, the effort you make, not compatible to the rewards. Yeah. So it's very natural that we cannot attract so many mathematicians. But I think the subject it's so interesting, so important that it will live on.
So you don't see any immediate remedies for these?
I don't see it's necessary. Probably we may already have too many mathematicians.
You think so?
Oh yeah, I think like this summer institute. I think or half of the size, so probably even better, or even.
You mean for communicating, but they are. I mean, in a sense, mathematicians are really in great demand in many various sectors of society. I mean, not only as teachers, but also in industry and so on.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's mathematics as a profession has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it probably doesn't make the life of a mathematician more comfortable. I think in the early days, you do something, you have a few friends, and you write up, you communicate through letters. To me, so that was a very, very nice period. Now you have crowds coming to your lecture, and so many people.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
and then the computer. Yeah.
And then the computer.
Yeah.
So, for example, do you think that being a pure mathematician and applied mathematicians are distinct professions?
No. I think I don't see it much distinction. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you are really in favor of training people for both directions at the same institutes and having close collaboration?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah.
And another, I mean, to come back to
it's coming like a subject like differential geometry. You see, if take something like characteristic classes, it has application in physics. Yeah. Not only that, I think differential geometry is also important in biological problems because in the structure of DNA and so on, they are involved with the geometric properties of closed curves or pairs of closed curves. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, people in pure mathematics could make very fundamental contributions to this applied problems.
But they have to have an open mind.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And what is, in your opinion, the best way to introduce young people to mathematics? In a sense, one has to educate them without discouraging them. You said it's hard work and not so rewarding immediately. So how do you feel one should start to expose young people to mathematics?
I don't know. As I said, you see, my philosophy is different. I don't try to make propaganda. I try to attract people to mathematics. Yeah, I think those who are willing to put out the effort should come willingly. If they don't do anything, if they find other activities more rewarding or at least more interesting, I would just let them do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there won't be any shortage of mathematicians.
So that's your feeling.
That's my feeling. That's my Chinese way of thinking. If possible, do nothing.
Let it go.
Let it go.